Dwayne Johnson missed out on playing Jack Reacher for the most ridiculous reason. Dwayne Johnson almost played Jack Reacher. He would have been perfect for the role. Johnson is muscular and 6'5" tall, just like the character in Lee Child's books. The protagonist, a former military investigator, is also described as badass, so Johnson would have had an easy time walking tall and changing the hierarchy of movie heroes plucked from novels. Unfortunately, Hollywood's casting choices are rarely straightforward, so the role eventually went to Tom Cruise before going to the much better suited Alan Ritchson. In the 80s, Jack Reacher would have been played by someone like Arnold Schwarzenegger, had the character existed at the time. Reacher debuted in the 1997 book The Killing Floor and has since appeared in 28 novels and short stories. Johnson revealed that he auditioned to play the character in the Paramount movies, but he was rejected. Given the actor's track record, Lee Child was initially pleased with the choice of Tom Cruise, but he later acknowledged that this was a mistake, admitting that Alan Ritchson was indeed a better Reacher. Dwayne Johnson wasn't considered famous enough to play Jack Reacher. In a Facebook Q&A video, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson was asked if there was ever a role in Hollywood that he wanted and didn't get. The Fast and Furious star quickly confirmed that there was indeed such a role, and it was none other than Jack Reacher. In Hollywood, actors are kind of like in a box. There are a lot of actors that can vie for a particular role because it calls for them to have a certain look, skin color, size, etc. Fortunately for me, there aren't a lot of guys at all who look like me. Johnson, who both revered and resembled Jack Reacher, had campaigned for the part and was genuinely puzzled when he didn't get it. There certainly seems to have been a royalty-related prejudice against him, a fast-rising star who had entered Hollywood via the easy WWE route. According to the actor, he was overlooked when Tom Cruise showed interest. The producers simply didn't think it wise to cast someone like him over someone like Cruise, who has a wonderful record at the box office. On the other hand, Johnson hadn't quite proven himself in Hollywood when production on the first Jack Reacher movie began. His wrestling glory days were behind him, and his only major hits were The Scorpion King and The Other Guys. The choice of director also worked against Johnson. Christopher McQuarrie, who has gone on to be one of Tom Cruise's frequent collaborators, had previously worked with the Mission Impossible star in Valkyrie and forged a great relationship with him. He thus preferred him over all the actors that auditioned. Johnson admits that he was disappointed by the snub, but he accepted the outcome anyway. Now, this was over 10 years ago, and I was in a much different place. I recognize that. Tom was obviously the biggest movie star in the world, and I was not. Years later, Dwayne Johnson doesn't have any regrets. His career is exactly where he'd like it to be. Missing out on Jack Reacher opened other doors for Dwayne Johnson. Dwayne Johnson must have been disappointed then, but missing out on Jack Reacher was the best thing that ever happened to him. Production on the movie began shortly before that of Fast 5. If Johnson had been cast as the bone-breaking military vet, he would have never gotten to play Luke Hobbs, the role that changed his career for the better. When you think of larger-than-life action heroes, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson is almost always at the top of the list. Towering at 6'5" with a physique that looks chiseled from stone, he's the kind of star who seems tailor-made for roles that demand a dominating physical presence. So when Jack Reacher, the iconic character from Lee Child's best-selling novels, was adapted into a film, it seemed like a match made in Hollywood heaven. Except, it didn't happen. And the reason why Dwayne Johnson missed out on playing Jack Reacher might just be one of the most ridiculous Hollywood decisions ever. The perfect fit that never was. Jack Reacher, as written in the books, is a force of nature. He's described as 6'5", 250 pounds of sheer muscle with hands the size of dinner plates. Reacher is a walking battering ram, someone you don't pick a fight with unless you're tired of breathing. That description sounds an awful lot like Dwayne Johnson. Johnson himself certainly thought so. In fact, he was extremely interested in playing Reacher when the books first gained Hollywood attention. As he revealed years later in interviews, he lobbied hard to land the role. He loved the books, admired the character's no-nonsense attitude, and believed he could bring an authentic version of Reacher to life on screen. But despite everything lining up, the right look, the right charisma, the right action movie credentials, Dwayne Johnson wasn't cast. Instead, the role went to Tom Cruise. Wait, Tom Cruise? Now, Tom Cruise is undoubtedly one of the biggest movie stars in history. His list of box office successes is staggering. But in terms of physical resemblance to Jack Reacher, Cruise doesn't exactly match the blueprint. Standing at 5'7", Cruise is almost a full foot shorter than Reacher's described height. Fans of the books were confused. Critics were skeptical. Even Lee Child admitted diplomatically that Cruise didn't have the physicality readers would expect from Reacher. So why was Cruise chosen over a seemingly perfect candidate like Johnson? Hollywood logic or lack thereof. The main reason boiled down to this: star power. At the time, Tom Cruise was considered a guaranteed box office draw. Studios were playing it safe. They wanted a name that could sell tickets all over the world, and Cruise's brand was, and still is, enormous internationally. From a purely business perspective, it made a kind of cold corporate sense. But creatively, it was a bizarre mismatch that left many fans scratching their heads. Imagine turning down a literal human embodiment of Jack Reacher because another actor, however talented, had a shinier nameplate. It's almost like rejecting a real-life Superman because a slightly more famous guy looks better in sunglasses. Johnson's good-natured reaction. In typical Dwayne Johnson fashion, he didn't throw a tantrum. He didn't badmouth anyone. Years later, he spoke about the casting decision with surprising humility and humor. Speaking in interviews, Johnson said, "Greater than, I was in early discussions for the role, but eventually it all worked out the way it was meant to. Tom was a megastar, and I wasn't at that time. I like to think now, in hindsight, that I was spared because everything happens for a reason." It's a classic Johnson move, gracious, optimistic, and grateful for the way his career evolved. After all, missing out on Jack Reacher hardly derailed him. Within a few years, Johnson became one of the highest paid and most beloved actors in Hollywood, with massive franchises like Fast and Furious, Jumanji, and Moana under his belt. In some strange way, not playing Reacher may have helped him find roles that fit his bigger-than-life personality even better. What might have been. Still, it's hard not to wonder, what would a Dwayne Johnson-led Jack Reacher movie have looked like? Picture it. Reacher walking into a bar, towering over everyone, his mere presence enough to send the bad guys scrambling. The dry wit. The devastating fights that feel almost too real. The screen practically shaking as Reacher dispatches enemies with bone-crunching efficiency. Johnson could have brought all that and more, plus his natural charisma and humor, which are sometimes missing from Reacher's very stoic literary persona. Maybe Johnson's Reacher would have had a slightly lighter touch, but it's easy to imagine audiences loving it. Instead, the Reacher films with Cruise, while entertaining, never quite captured the gritty, grounded brutality that defines the books. It took years and a change to streaming before fans finally got something closer with Alan Ritchson's portrayal in Amazon's Reacher series, a show that immediately resonated because, at last, Reacher actually looked like Reacher. The lesson learned. Dwayne Johnson missing out on Jack Reacher might seem like a small footnote in Hollywood history, but it reveals something bigger, sometimes the most